Oh, there we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Meredith Gershenson. I'm a research analyst here at workforce.com. And today, as the title suggests, we're going to talk a little bit about building a business case for workforce management software. Today, I'm joined with Nick Ferrif. He is a senior consultant at Forrester Research. Nick, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks.
Awesome. I'm also joined by Matt Mariosa. He is an account manager and business consultant of the Workforce UK office. Matt, thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure. Hello, everyone.
Awesome. To give everyone a quick lay of the land of our Big Marker webinar platform, on the right, we have the chat box. Feel free to throw in any questions. We will get to those at the very end for a live Q&A with everybody. And then we do have a couple poll questions throughout the webinar. We love to interact with you all, hear what everyone's thinking. So those will just slide up on the bottom left of your screen. So be sure to interact with those. And then we do have a handout. We have the full case study from Forrester Research, all new information. So feel free to click on that. I will share that at the very end of the webinar as well. And finally, just to give a little background on workforce.com, we are a workforce management software company who specializes in scheduling and time and attendance. And really our overarching goal is just to help business leaders and frontline managers make the best decisions for their company. Awesome. So I'm going to pull up the slide deck from Nick and let him get things kick-started here. So Nick, take it away. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Meredith. Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Ferrif. I'm a senior consultant in Forrester's Total Economic Impact practice, where I specialize in building financial business cases for technology investments. And today we'll talk about how to build a business case for workforce management technology using the workforce.com TEI study that we recently completed. All right, let's get into it here. So we'll start off with a quick agenda for today. So we'll start by exploring the methodology that we used for this study and what a TEI study is. Then we'll dive into the customer journey that led the customers to purchase workforce.com. And then we'll explore the financial results from the study and the financial model, as well as some tips on how to build a business case. And finally, as Meredith mentioned, we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A as well. All right. So before I go any further, I want to quickly explain what a TEI study is, what we were measuring, and how this research was performed. So what is a TEI? Well, Forrester performs an annual survey of decision makers and found that 90% think that having an effective business case is valuable when making an investment decision. So what is an effective business case? Well, here's some popular business case methodologies that you might be familiar with. And I can kind of walk you through what those are and what, where TEI falls in. So TCO, or total cost of ownership, it really only looks at the costs of a solution. ROI, or return on investment, is a step in the right direction because it takes costs and benefits of a solution into account. And then we have TEI, or total economic impact. And we do everything included in an ROI analysis, but we take things a step further by incorporating risk and flexibility into our calculations. And in a TEI study, we only use data collected from real customers who have real life experience with this technology. So for this TEI study, what steps did we take? Here's kind of a visualization of the steps that we took to build the financial model and ultimately write the case study that we're talking about, and that hopefully you can have a chance to read. So first, we started off by doing due diligence. We read about workforce.com, and we interviewed subject matter experts over there at workforce.com. Then we conducted in-depth interviews with 7 representatives at 6 different organizations, all customers who have experience using workforce.com. After those customer interviews, we created a financial model based on the data collected in those interviews. And then using the data and using that financial model, we ultimately write up the case study. And then that's kind of what we're here to talk about today. So here's just some quick disclosures. I don't need to get into these, but just important for the webinar here. And now here's the high level results. So kind of a sneak peek, we'll kind of backtrack and get into the methodology and who we spoke with, but just want to present, the results of the study. So we found some really fantastic financial returns, a 456% ROI, return on investment, net benefits of $8.8 million, and a net present value, which is benefits minus costs, of $7.2 million. And all of these figures are presented in a 3-year financial model. And you'll also notice that we've included some quotes throughout the presentation. Now, I'm not going to actually read those quotes out loud, but I do encourage you to review them as they give a good perspective into how the customers felt about workforce.com, and they've kind of framed the benefits in those customers' own words. And another quick disclaimer is that we publish this in Australia and in the US, so there might be some different words on there like schedule and roster. And so just a heads up when you're reviewing those quotes. And this quote right here discusses the efficiency gains for scheduling with workforce.com. All right, so who did we spoke with? Where do we collect the data for the study? So we spoke with 7 representatives at 6 different organizations, again, all with experience using workforce.com for their workforce management. And these organizations represented a few different industries. They have a pretty varied organizational size and use case. So we feel like we collected a good breadth of data for this analysis. Now, here's the key challenges that the interviewees discussed. In the interviews, they shared some common challenges that they all were having with their legacy workforce management systems that ultimately led them to this investment in workforce.com. So interviewees were aware of changing regulations and recent news stories about wage and labor violations. And they were all pretty keen to reduce those risks at their organization. But more importantly, they also wanted to ensure that their employees were being properly compensated, so issues like that wouldn't arise in the future. So the risk reduction was important, especially for the businesses and from a business perspective. But in the interviewees actually highlighted the fact that this is going to help protect their employees from any potential bad actors that they might not have been able to see prior to having a solution like this. Interviewees were also looking for a solution that provided visibility and accountability into their individual franchisees and franchise managers. Organizations wanted to give their managers all of the data and tools that they need to be successful and keep labor costs as low as possible. So prior to workforce.com, managers had to try to keep track of each worker's status, themselves, the number of hours they worked, if there's any special requirements or accommodations, their skill level, their particular skill sets. By leveraging a technology like workforce.com, by automating a lot of that data, it removed a lot of the complexity and risk from those managers, from those decisions that they're making, and allowed them to really just focus on their job, focus on the task at hand. And finally, organizations also mentioned that consumer demand shifted, especially in the last few years, particularly mentioning that takeout and delivery had vastly increased the volume compared to prior. And their legacy systems did not actually have the ability to really account for that and help them. They couldn't sort of efficiently deliver the amount of delivery and takeout orders that they were taking. And so they needed a new solution that could help with both of those revenue streams. So overall, organizations needed better visibility into what their franchisees were doing. And they wanted to give their managers better tools so they could work faster, more efficiently, and reduce risks. So based on what we heard from the 6 customers, we created a description of a composite organization. So this composite organization is a mythical company. They look a little bit like all of the 6 companies that we interviewed, but not exactly like any of them. And in a TEI study, the financial model and also the explanation of the benefits and costs are all presented from the perspective of this composite organization. We also try to include some anecdotes and quotes and things like that to help give additional context and help folks that, maybe if your company doesn't look exactly like this company, help understand those benefits. But all the benefits in the study are kind of presented through the lens of this composite. And here's some of the characteristics. So it's a global food and retail organization with 250 locations, over 5,000 workforce.com users and employees, and 250 managers, which is one for each store. So now, looking through this lens of this composite, we'll get into the financial benefits that we actually quantified for the study. So here's the high level, the 4 quantified benefits that we found for this study. It was efficiency gains for compliance and payroll teams, reduced risk of a compliance failure, efficiency gains for managers, and then labor cost savings from scheduling optimization, essentially the reduced cost of labor. So now I'm going to get into each one of these benefits in a little bit more detail. So that's the next few slides. All right. So the first benefit here, and this was actually one of the major goals of adopting workforce.com for the interviewees, was to help control and reduce labor costs. Interviewees discussed how with workforce.com, all of their managers were now on the same page, reporting the same metrics, driving to the same outcomes. Essentially, everyone was now speaking the same language. One customer ran a competition amongst their stores and ultimately reduced their labor costs by 11% after the first year. So some really significant savings there. And they were essentially able to deliver the same revenue with 11% less labor because of the efficiencies that Workforce.com unlocked. And we heard similar stories from other customers who were able to optimize their rosters to whatever internal metrics they preferred. And so that was another unique aspect of Workforce.com, is that it could ingest customer internal data, like point of sale system data or other types of data, to help predict and influence those rostering suggestions. And customers reported that they really found a lot of value in that. And so before I get into the financial model, I do want to quickly kick it over to Matt here, and just to see what has had the biggest impact on businesses who have adopted Workforce.com in relation to scheduling optimization. So have you seen this benefit out there in the real world?
Yeah, absolutely. And like essentially it's having the right people in the right place at the right time. So predominantly we're used across retail and hospitality industry. And then before using Workforce.com, we would see companies repeating the same schedules week in, week out, without factoring variables such as, the weather, events, seasonality, which resulted in discrepancies between the number of employees required for customer demand. So what customers were quickly identifying here is by using Workforce, how they could efficiently forecast staffing in the needs, like based on previous sales data. So creating optimal schedules with just a click of a button, which factored in customer behavior, and it gave them access to the labor analytics just to make sure they were making proactive data-driven decisions. So what we're seeing here is from a customer, we're seeing labor cost savings between 25 to 30 hours per week per store across 280 stores.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Awesome. So now I'll kind of get into the financial model that we found for our study here. So each store brings in roughly $1.25 million in revenue annually. With Workforce.com, stores are able to reduce their overall labor costs by 5% after 3 years. And I did mention that one customer achieved an 11% reduction in 1 year. So we feel like our model is being relatively conservative with that number, and these results are pretty achievable. And by improving labor efficiency, and reducing the number of hours worked per store, the composite organization experiences a significant financial savings of $5.3 million over 3 years, just in labor costs alone. So that's the first benefit that we quantified. Now I'm going to jump into the second one. The next benefit is efficiency gains for managers. So some interviewees had more sophisticated legacy systems than others. Some had some level of automation or digital tools, while others were mostly relying on Excel or paper and pencil. One challenge that all of these organizations shared, regardless of what their legacy technology was getting their store managers to build the rosters in a consistent way using those available tools. So we heard that managers, they typically find something that works for them and they stick to it, and it's kind of hard to get them to move. Well, with Workforce.com, this all changed. Organizations now had a centralized tool that managers could pull up on their mobile device or the computer. So it made it really accessible and a lot easier for these managers to kind of do things in the moment and use the tools. Workforce.com, it automated a lot of the more challenging and error-prone pieces of scheduling and rostering, like monitoring how many hours certain employees are working, choosing the right skills and experience levels at the right times, based on predicted demand. All those kind of complicated things were sort of, reduced or simplified using Workforce.com. And finally, Workforce.com also ingests the organizational data, like point of sale system data, as well as environmental data and other data, to help sort of build those more accurate rosters, help predict when those inflection points will be. So all of these factors led managers to spend significantly less time on rostering activities. And it also helped them spend less time on non-rostering activities. So because Workforce.com uses real-time data, managers had an easier time with things like managing shift swaps, onboarding and offboarding employees, and just generally staying in touch with their workers and with what's going on in their stores. So for the financial model, managers experienced efficiency gains in two critical areas: rostering activities and non-rostering activities. For rostering, Workforce.com. So prior to Workforce.com, managers were spending about 4 hours per week building and maintaining those rosters. With Workforce.com, managers are able to reduce that time by 80% after 3 years, so saving over 3 hours per week on those same rostering activities. And that's time that can now be spent, actually managing their stores, visiting, working with employees, those types of things. And the second area of benefit is non-rostering activities. So we found that store managers save about an hour per week on non-rostering activities like communicating with employees, managing shift swaps, onboarding and offboarding, pulling reports, all those kind of things that take up people's time, take up these managers' time. And with Workforce.com, all the data is immediately available through a phone or through a computer. So managers are no longer spending time compiling reports or chasing down employees. And overall, managers saved about 4.2 hours per week, representing $1.6 million in efficiency gains. And now I do want to pass it back over to Matt and just see, what trends are you seeing out there right now where Workforce.com has saved time for managers?
Thanks. Yeah, so I was speaking to a manager the other day, and he said to me that the old ancient saying is time is money, and Workforce has given them time back. So, which is a beautiful thing for managers. So having more time allows them to sort of spend the time looking at the business and looking at the bigger picture. So what we're seeing across the UK is at the moment, I'm sure globally as well, is a bit of a staffing crisis, which means the talent pool is currently made of various skills and skill levels, which means managers will need to spend more time with the onboarding and the training for the employees. So if these companies aren't using Workforce or Workforce management system, they most likely wouldn't have the time to be creating all these rosters. It becomes a minefield when they're using paper rosters and old spreadsheets, which means they won't have time for the staff. So there's a bit of a pattern if there's staff are undertrained or employees aren't happy or enjoying the work, it becomes a domino effect. And with Workforce, it's the simplicity of it that enables the employees, like you said, using the app, putting through leave, shift swapping. They're more efficient in themselves, so it's less questions for the managers, and that's what we're hearing. So yeah, we get rid of those spreadsheets for the managers so they can focus on the bigger picture. So what used to take hours for a manager will now take minutes.
All right, thanks, Matt. Move on to the next slide here. All right, so the next benefit that we're going to get into is reduced compliance risks. So for interviewees, compliance risk and litigation related to compliance was top of mind and represented a real liability for the interviewed organizations. And Workforce.com was one of the major ways that these organizations were looking to protect themselves by gaining better visibility and control over wages and timesheets. So prior to Workforce.com, organizations had very little visibility or control over how their franchisees treated and compensated employees. So outside of an annual audit or maybe on-site visits, the parent organization didn't really have a lot of control, didn't have a lot of avenues to properly audit each individual franchise, or they didn't even have an easy way to ensure that they were being compliant and complying with labor laws and things like that. So deploying Workforce.com was a huge help for these organizations because once the system is set up for their business, all of the compliance activities were monitored automatically. Managers were flagged if there's any risks of overtime or any compliance violations. So organizations were able to reduce compliance failure risk in multiple ways, and I'll list some of those ways right now. So they're able to ensure that all employees are compensated according to their specific labor agreement or union agreement. They were able to monitor and control for any overtime. They're able to monitor any changes or adjustments that were happening to timesheets that maybe managers were making or adjustments that were happening, after those timesheets were turned in. They're able to provide reporting and search capabilities for compliance managers and auditors. And they're also able to give leadership visibility into every single employee at every single store, so they have an accurate, full view of their organization at any time. And that was actually something that these companies struggled with prior. And so for the financial model, in this case, we took an average value of the wage and hour settlements of $2.9 million. And again, this is an average of kind of the overall settlement value for cases over the last few years. We estimated that with Workforce.com, organizations are able to reduce their risk exposure by about 20%. And we're essentially saying that with Workforce.com will help cover 20% of that exposure risk. Interviewees actually felt that the risk reduction was probably greater than that. But they also mentioned that, they've had to work to install some different checks and balances in place, and there are some human error, human risk factors in play here. So again, a lot of the interviewees felt that their risk was being reduced by more than 20%. Again, we wanted to make sure we took into account some of those other sort of external variables, and so that's where we settled on that number. And this 20% risk reduction represents about $900,000 in financial benefits over 3 years. And it's important to note that that figure can become much higher if there's an audit or if your organization is maybe much bigger than our composite organization here. So some pretty significant, both peace of mind impact and also some financial impact to reducing the risks. So moving on to our last quantified benefit, we found that payroll and compliance teams had less manual labor with Workforce.com. So interviewees reported that their payroll and compliance teams now had access to all of the data that they needed, when they needed it, and in a format that was actually helpful. So prior to Workforce.com, these teams would often have to submit a request to an individual store or individual manager to chase down contact information or compliance information. And it was difficult to even get an updated list of all the employees working at the business, right? There just wasn't a lot of connected internal systems. And that made compliance a challenge. And for payroll teams, all timesheets, prior, there's a variety of stories, some were paper, some were digital, but now, all the timesheets are located in a central place. They're all in the same format and they can be reviewed and approved much quicker. So for the financial model, the composite organization spends 4 hours per week per store on payroll and compliance activities. This includes reviewing and improving timesheets, performing compliance and audit around wage and hours worked, and also dealing with any compliance and reporting requirements. So with Workforce.com, these activities for the compliance and payroll teams are essentially reduced, are more efficient. They're reduced by 75%, saving about 3 hours per week and $990,000 for the organization. And I do want to kick it back over to Matt really quick, and just to see how does Workforce.com reduce manual labor for payroll? Does this kind of line up with what you're seeing out there in the marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the trends that we're seeing is not only customers saving manual labor, but saving on cost too. So with payroll integration, our customers don't need to be spending sort of more money on outsourcing for accountants. That they can do this all in-house, and as you said, in a centralized system. So because the timesheets are all automated, they're easily integrated. Customers no longer need to devote days, like you were saying, or even months to go through all the paperwork and process all the staff pay. So wage costs are managed more efficiently. The wage costs drop down significantly, and you can see this in the first year of the platform being in place. So every single month of payroll is down from the previous year, even with the wage increase. So that's what we're seeing. So what the figures we kind of see, or speaking to a customer only the other day, is the payroll processing time is, as you've already mentioned, from 3 to 4 days, just now only to 3 to 4 hours, which is like a 90% time reduction in payroll, with a 12-month wage bill reduction. So yeah, we're starting to see, we're seeing really good results and having some really good conversations.
Nice. Yeah. And I can say that in the interviews, we did hear some similar kind of anecdotes, especially around, if the organization did use outsourcing, it was certainly reduced by leveraging Workforce.com. So yeah, that was another piece that we heard in the study. Isn't in this particular version of the financial model, but I do encourage everyone to go and download and read the full study, because we do include all those little tidbits like that in there. All right. Let's move on here. So there were a few benefits that we weren't able to quantify, but they were still important. And, the customers still talked about these benefits. And so I do want to highlight a couple of these. And again, these were benefits that customers felt like they're important. They came up in our interviews, came up in those conversations, but it just either, too difficult or just a little bit tricky to quantify. So I think the big one in this list that's important is customer experience and the reduction in employee turnover. So organizations reported that with Workforce.com helping build rosters and schedules, their employees and their customers were both happier because their stores were staffed at the right level with the correct set of skills to meet customer demand. So there wasn't any skill gaps, and employees felt like they had the people there, they had the staff they needed to be successful. And when the store is running smoothly and the workers feel like they have the resources that they need, it's much easier to focus on delivering and delighting customers, right? So the customers also felt that, and organizations reported measured improvements in CSAT and NPS scores after deploying Workforce.com, and they attributed a lot of that success to Workforce.com, again, ensuring they had the right staff and the right, right people, the right skills, the right number of people to accommodate the demand at those times. So again, there were also some unquantified benefits, and I want to make sure that we highlight those. The next section here, we're gonna move on to costs. So there were a couple costs associated with the solution, so we will dive into those. We basically found two primary areas. We had annual licensing costs and training. Annual licensing and training, and then the second one was deployment and ongoing management costs. So I'll quickly jump into these. So the first area of costs, Workforce.com licensing costs. They follow a monthly seat-based subscription model that customers reported was easy to understand, and it met their expectations. For training, customers said that managers do require some training, but it's pretty minimal. And they also mentioned that it's something that the managers, it didn't feel like a burden. The managers enjoyed it, and then they really hit the ground running when they actually started using the solution. Interviewees also cited deployment timelines as short as 3 weeks, with minimal ongoing maintenance of the system, with only a few hours dedicated per year. And interviewees did mention that it's important to ensure that all the labor and enterprise agreements and union agreements and everything are properly set up in the system initially. And that's probably the biggest lift, was getting everything set up initially. But once that's what's up and running, again, they found pretty minimal maintenance, relatively easy to keep this thing up and running. And they also found that changes and updates to any of those agreements or anything like that are pretty easy to process. So, not a ton on the cost there. But again, I do encourage you to go download the full study. We have a full write-up on each of these benefits and each of these costs. So a quick back to our high-level findings. Again, we're getting towards the end of our presentation here. We found a return on investment, or an ROI, of 456%, a net present value of $7.2 million, and a payback period of less than 6 months for this investment. And with that, I believe we'll move on to Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick and Matt. I really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and share that case for anyone that wants a little more in-depth look on some of those benefits and those costs. Feel free to click on that link. And yeah, we will move on to the Q&A, as Nick said. So stick around. Thank you, guys.
Hello, everybody. So, as I just said, we're going to move on to the Q&A portion. I wanted to touch on a couple questions. First and foremost, I did get a personal message from a Kelly M. She was asking regarding the second key finding, how fast did this efficiency generally come to fruition? In other words, did it take years of hands-on experience for managers to learn how to use the system effectively, or were they able to automate processes fairly early on? Nick, how about we start with you?
Yeah, sure. I can take a stab at this one. According to the customers, and again, if you kind of look at the model, you'll see how this sort of plays out. But there was a slight learning curve for the managers to sort of fully adopt all of the capabilities that Workforce.com was offering and all the different features. One of the things we heard is that things like cognitive rostering and really learning how to use that system and trust that it is in fact producing the best rosters did take a little bit of time just for managers to get used to that. But there were also a lot of efficiencies that happened right away. And a lot of that came from having a centralized digital solution that had all of their worker information, their store information, kind of having everything at their fingertips. And so we did hear about a lot of sort of immediate efficiency gains when it came to schedule swapping, when it came to communicating with employees, when it came to ensuring that stores were using promotions and things like that. So I think there is kind of two sides of that. So again, there was a chunk of the efficiency gains that happened sort of right away, some of the really intuitive features, and then there was a longer tail of the managers learning how to really get the most out of some of the more advanced capabilities.
Matt, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, specifically speaking on some of those more advanced capabilities.
I agree with Nick really with everything. I guess for me, like workforce, and I think what we hear from a lot of our clients is that it's very simple to use. When it comes to cognitive rostering, we do have like the ongoing support. So I think these things can take time, and I think it is a bit of trust. I think that's the main thing. But when you have a dedicated team, the support team that are always there and happy to help, and implementation team to go through it with you, I think they feel more safe. But yeah, I think it's more of a trust thing. And there's certain things that are just simpler to use, and in a couple of weeks you can easily pick it up.
Yeah, definitely. And to even go off of that, I think it's interesting when you're coming from, more manual processes to put trust in something that might be scary and it's automation or anything like that. If we're looking at comparing workforce to a Tesla car with the self-driving automation, right? It's a little scary to put your hands, literally maybe even taking them off the wheel and trusting that process and trusting the technology. But I think slides like you just presented on, Nick, showing exactly what goes into it and, kind of inside look into the engine of workforce, it hopefully will, instill some confidence in those users. So I think that's a great point.
One more thing. Sorry, we did actually account for this in the model as well. So if you notice, those efficiency gains kind of grow over the 3 years, and that's exactly what we found, is that essentially they do, the managers do get better. They do start trusting the system,
Right.
and so the efficiency does grow.
Definitely, it's more of a partnership than anything else, right? Awesome.
Exactly.
We did get an email in from Caroline S. She asked, workforce management software seems more like an internally facing solution for employees and managers. I'm curious as to how it improves customer satisfaction, given that you mention it as an unquantified benefit. Nick, why don't you go first for this one?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So I think this one, thinking more broadly, right? When stores have the right number of workers with the right skill sets, their operations run smoother. And that's what we heard. And so workforce.com helped these stores have the right set of skills, have the right number of employees. And essentially what that does is that means that, customer orders are being prepared correctly. They're getting out on time. The line isn't getting too crazy. The businesses are clean, right? There's all of these sort of factors that go into running a smooth business that are going to impact customer experience. And so that's part of where this benefit comes from, is customers just noticing that these stores are, they're running smoothly, right? Things are going well. Another part of it is, when there's enough workers, when they have the right skill sets, they're happier. They can actually address the customers. They can do their jobs well.
Right.
And then the other piece was also that just the managers have more time to manage the stores. And so they make sure that, each store is participating in the right promotions. And again, the stores are properly cleaned and maintained. So, while it is sort of an internally facing solution, we definitely heard that there was a significant impact to the customers.
Definitely. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's keeping up with the demand. And if you've got enough people there to keep up with that demand, then the customers are happy. Like if you're in hospitality, busy restaurant or a bar, you've got enough staff there to, manage all them customers. Then of course, they're going to get a good service, which means the customers are going to be happy. One thing that I love, and a story that I love, is from our shift feedback, where on a Wednesday night, some employees were given like sort of negative feedback, and the manager looked at it. It's like, what's the feedback they're getting? Why is it negative? That's because every Wednesday the stocks were low, so customers were coming in and they were unhappy with seeing such low stock. So once they got that feedback, the arrangement of the stock coming in a day earlier to make customers happy. So a knock-on effect.
Definitely. And I think it's safe to say, a lot of people that go into an industry like hospitality or retail, they want to have more of that customer facing experience. They don't necessarily want to get caught up in the weeds of the admin work and, the managerial day-to-day that the job often brings. So to be able to take on some of that load is a huge goal of ours, and to absorb that is, it's kind of our whole main business principle. Cool. Kevin H. emailed in asking, how would ROI range from companies much larger versus smaller businesses?
I think I can take that one. And So that's an interesting question. And I want to be careful not to sort of overly generalize the results based on the size of a business, right? Because many of the benefits stem from, sort of processes improving, managers getting more efficient, things like that happening, labor efficiency gains. And so those benefits will impact, a business of any size. And so I think, I'll try to address that, but I think a better way to look at the model and kind of look at the study is to think about your own business and how would these benefits, how would these an efficiency gain for your managers, how would being able to have better control of your labor costs, how would that impact your individual business? Because again, you might have 2 or 3 stores, and it's going to have a huge impact. And it maybe getting these efficiency gains allows you to continue to run and continue to operate. You might have an extremely large business with thousands and thousands of locations, and you might be shaving those margins down, or improving those margins by small rates. And so both of those scenarios are going to have different ROIs, different impacts to the business. So I think it's important to, again, just kind of take a look at what's happening with the benefits, like what impact it's having on our composite organization, and then think about how would this apply to my business, right? Where would I see these gains? Where would I see these benefits? Because that is going to have a lot more to do with the ROI than I'm a huge business or I'm a small business.
Right. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. Whether you're large or small, there's many factors that you have to be in place and have to be over. Like, if the compliance is not there, or your labor isn't good, or the schedule isn't good, then you won't see them benefits. So there's many things that you've got to have in place to in order to see that return of investment, regardless if you're small or big.
I kind of have a follow-up question. Nick, you might have the data on this, but for those, for larger businesses, does it take a shorter amount of time or a longer amount of time to see those impacts on your ROI, or those effects, those benefits?
That's a good question. So it's possible. So, I mean, one thing that you need to factor in here is change management. And of course, change management is one of the biggest challenges for any business, regardless of what industry you're in or what technology you're trying to implement, or, anything, right? It's hard to get people to change. And so, you could reason that in a larger business, it might be more important to have a very, a planned approach and a very thoughtful approach in how you're going to roll this out and make sure that, you're bringing people along. So I could see that, having an impact on, your timeline and your time to realize investment. But at the same time, people are resistant to change across all businesses. So, it could also impact the smaller ones in the same way. But I think when you're trying to move and you're trying to change much larger systems with more people involved and more processes, you could run into a few more headwinds that you just might need to prepare for. So,
right. Matt, a follow-up question for you, kind of going off that, depending on how big the organization is, how much time would you recommend, depending on the business being small or large or anywhere in between, of rolling out workforce?
As in how quick they can implement workforce into their business. I mean, look, we've seen, and as in the model, and it says as well, and I'm sure Nick's mentioned it, just within a few weeks, I think you can see some huge differences, and it can be rolled out. Like, we have a dedicated team that are there to do as much as they can. And, within an implementation, there's so many hours that we can set up. But yeah, I think within a few weeks, even from large enterprise clients, it can be done.
That's awesome.
And just to elaborate a little bit more, the capabilities, like, the ability to do two-way communication with employees or looking at shift swaps and things like that. Again, that's going to have a pretty immediate impact because there isn't a lot of resistance to those kind of tools, right? It's just sort of enabling something that was more difficult or wasn't possible before. So again, I want to be careful. Like, there is some impacts and some things that will happen right away. Right. It's really when it comes to the more like cognitive rostering and things like that, where it'll take the managers just to learn a little bit, just to get to trust the system a little bit. And so that's, again, yeah, there's sort of a spectrum of benefits here that we can think about.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, that's kind of the beauty of it. People are seeing that, number up front and saying, okay, this is kind of what we can expect. But the, happy little surprise at the end of the day is it being, okay, there's actually more ROI here than we even anticipated. There's way more cost savings here. So I think that's kind of those small benefits, those small niche points, like the rostering is a great example of, that's where workforce comes into play. And that's where people don't even anticipate the savings to be at the end of the day. And for those in the audience, again, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'm going to keep going along with these emailed questions in the meantime. We do have a question from a Bill D. He said, workforce management software seems like an internally facing solution for employees and managers. How does it improve customer satisfaction? Nick, why don't you go first here?
Sure. So I think this is pretty similar to the one that we addressed earlier, right? With the customer experience. And I think that, again, it really comes down to you're putting your employees in a better situation. You're giving them the tools they need, the colleagues that they need to do their jobs in the best way. And then, that is going to allow them to, interact with customers in the way that they want to, right? They just have what they need there. And so that's going to improve the customer experience at these businesses.
Right. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, excuse the pun, but if you're using workforce, you're going to have a happy workforce.
Yeah.
Like Nick said, it's a knock-on effect that if you're the simplicity of using everything through the app, whether you're shift swapping, picking up shifts, putting through your leave, taking hours away from managers where they can be efficient and the manager can look at the bigger picture and everyone's happy and you're going into work happy, then the customer's going to be happy. So yeah, that's how I see it. And that's what we see as well.
Right. Happy workforce, happy life.
There we go. Yeah.
As the old saying goes, right? Awesome. We do have one more question here. This person asks, so this is based on a composite organization, as you said. Can you speak to the variation we'd see here depending on the size of the organization using workforce.com or any other workforce management software for that matter? And we kind of touched on this, but I'd love to reiterate here.
Sure. Yeah. So again, I think it really does come down to those specific benefits, right? I think we can probably find some examples of where, again, a really large organization, it's going to impact a lot of managers, a lot of employees, a lot of stores. So, they might see large numbers when it comes to the returns. But again, in a smaller organization, those same benefits are still going to have a big impact and their costs are less, right? So, when you look at a thing like ROI, it's benefits and costs. And so I think that, again, taking that just the ROI number is a little bit sort of disingenuous. It doesn't kind of do, it doesn't give credit to all of the different benefits and all the ways that workforce can impact an organization. So again, I think it's just important to look at your organization, look at the challenges that you're dealing with, and then see how a solution like workforce.com could help solve some of those challenges. And then, what's the impact going to be? So again, I'll always come back to I think it's best to try to apply this to your specific situation, rather than thinking, big organization, like higher ROI, low, like that's just not exactly how it's going to work out.
Definitely. We're just barely scratching the surface at the end of the day. And, the slides touched on a lot, but of course it all revolves around the aspect of, cost savings around investing back into your workforce management. Of course, being the actual title of the webinar, that's what we're going to be talking about. But there's so much more and it goes so much deeper than that from an HR ops and GM standpoint. Matt, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's like Nick said, and like I said before, whether you're small or big, there's so many benefits, and like you said, just scratching the surface. So, when we're speaking to clients or potential clients, it's just finding out them pain points, like what can we do differently? Why are you spending all your time? Let's see, or show you where we can save you the time. So, but it's really broad. It's really different for whether you're small or big, but there's definitely loads that workforce can do for regardless of the size of your business.
Definitely. And I kind of have a follow-up question for you, Matt, in terms of the managerial aspect, working directly with these managers, with these companies, what are some areas of efficiency gains that are outside of maybe the ROI that you're seeing? So whether it's in scheduling, their payroll, how many hours are cut from doing these admin tasks, anything like that?
Yeah, so like in the video, I think when you're looking at payroll, and it's all centralized, and they can go back to, you know, all the timesheets are automated, or there's auto approval. If you need to go back to making adjustments, then, you know, it's flagged. You can go there and do that. But this is saving you so much time, and I think within a week you're saving 3 to 4 hours in payroll. When it comes to managers, you know, they're saving a similar time. You know, it could take, instead of being 4 hours in a week to make a schedule, it can take 45 minutes. So you're looking at like historical data or patterns from old rosters, and at a click of a button, you know, they can be they're your future rosters that are made already. So it's saving a lot of time. And as I said before, and I'll say it again, it's for the managers to focus on the bigger picture there, and it just gives them more time.
Yeah, if we're talking work-life balance principles, workforce is good, everybody. Awesome. Well, that pretty much covers all the questions. I'm about to share our Forrester ROI case study. This is on our landing page. So if you open up this link, you will see that there is ROI calculator and then the report itself. If you want the report, obviously click the report, fill out that form, and you should be able to download it immediately. Nick and Matt, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I know I learned a lot. I'm sure our audience did too. And who knows, maybe in 2023, we'll have to do a part 2.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Sounds good, guys. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye.